I think this Knicks team is playing with a sense of purpose that they were very clearly not satisfied after they won the East. And I think you're going to see that starting tonight in game one.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. So the NBA Finals are starting tonight. We got the New York Knicks versus the San Antonio Spurs. We have got Jonathan Macri, the dean of the Knicks Film School, with us on who and what to watch. Plus, Ukraine launched hundreds of drones on President Vladimir Putin's hometown of St. Petersburg in response to Russian strikes. Our chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, is going to tell us what that looks like on the ground there. But first, we are still getting the returns from last night's primaries, including some of the biggest races of 2026 so far. If we start in the state of California, there is the governor's race and who's going to replace Governor Gavin Newsom. And if a reality TV star from the hills should be the next mayor of Los Angeles. Then we have Iowa, a battleground, and we're seeing President Trump's hold on the GOP potentially slipping. So is it going to be MAGA or MAHA in November? Then there's the big picture question. So as we look at the results coming in, what trends are we seeing as we get closer and closer to November? So for this, I'm going to bring in NBC News chief data analyst Steve Kornacki, who is joining us once again in studio. Hi, Steve.
Yes, how you doing?
Long night, but here you are.
Here we are, and we don't have official call. It's the best kind of election night, right?
Yeah.
We go through the whole thing and we say, well, we still don't know.
So, and you know, listen, you were waiting for California. The results all did not come in. They're still trickling in as we speak, 3:30 p.m., I should say, Eastern time here on Wednesday. One of the biggest races still up in the air, and that is the governor. This was an all-party primary. And there was a huge field of candidates that were vying to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, who hit his term limit. Who's leading the pack right now? And walk us through kind of what all-party primary means.
Yeah, look, I mean, they put everybody on the same ballot, top two advance to the general election, which will be held, in November. That means it could be, theoretically, two candidates from the same party.
Yeah.
That's happened in California before since they put the system in. There's three candidates right now kind of in the mix there. Javier Becerra, the former Biden cabinet secretary, former congressman from Los Angeles. He's in the best shape, clearly, of the three of them, a Democrat. Steve Hilton is the top performing Republican right now. And Hilton and Becerra are kind of closely bunched 1-2 in the count right now.
Got it.
And then there's a gap in the third place candidate's the other Democrat, Tom Steyer. And the suspense right now, and this is where it's frustrating with California elections because it takes them so darn long to count the thing is, it will be days, a trickle kind of over the course of days of these late arriving vote by mail ballots. They can come in up to a week after election day.
Wow.
And the expectation is that those late arriving mail ballots, this is what's almost always the case in California, is they're heavily Democratic, which means theoretically, there's room for Steyer. If they're that Democratic, there could be room for Steyer to catch Hilton and get that other spot. So that would be Becerra versus Steyer in the runoff.
All right, let's talk the LA mayor's race, because we've been talking a lot about this. And you have the incumbent, Karen Bass, who is still in it. Then you have former reality TV star Spencer Pratt, who is also in this thing right now. He, by the way, was from the Hills. Then you have Nithya Raman as well. Walk us through what we are seeing there.
Yeah, so again, there's a large number of outstanding votes here, but Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, is clearly running in first right now in the returns. Spencer Pratt is running in second, and there is a pretty big gap there, a pretty significant gap between Pratt in second and Raman in third. And again, this is one of those runoff situations. If nobody gets the outright majority, and nobody's going to here, the top two are going to advance. So it certainly looks like Bass is on her way. And again, it's a situation where the only thing that could change it now is if the late arriving vote by mail is so heavily Democratic that it would lift Raman over Pratt for that second spot. But everything I was just saying about the steep hill that Steyer has to climb in the governor's race to make that happen, it's an even steeper hill right now for Raman.
Can we talk Iowa? Because that was actually a really big night for Iowa. I mean, I think a lot of people had their eyes on Iowa, and it's now looking like a showdown between MAGA and MAHA. Up until this moment, no Trump-endorsed candidate had actually lost out in this primary season. But we saw it last night. Randy Feenstra, right? He was endorsed by Donald Trump. He lost. He conceded to businessman Zach Lane, who had aligned himself with the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, for those that don't necessarily know. That's in Iowa's Republican primary for governor. Is this any evidence that the president's support is slipping?
So I think it's a complicated question. I think we've talked about this before. My own
Yeah.
view on this has been that the Trump endorsement or Trump involving himself in these Republican primaries, it's more potent when he is singling somebody out to oppose them. When he tells Republicans, this is the traitor,
Interesting.
this
So
is
not
the
to
apostate.
support them, but to oppose them.
Because in this race, this was not a situation where Trump came in for Feenstra and trashed Lane. And Lane, as a candidate, really strongly aligned himself with Trump, with MAGA, with the grassroots, with that sort of populist brand of conservatism. So, we've seen situations like that where those kinds of candidates have performed fairly well, even if Trump, opposes them. But the other interesting thing on it is this. The margin in that primary last night that Lane beat Feenstra by is about 1,500 votes. It was super, super close, okay? There were tens of that, more than 10,000 early votes had already been cast last Friday when Donald Trump made the endorsement. It was a very late endorsement of Feenstra, and a big chunk of votes had already been cast, and the final margin was only 1,500. There's a little bit of a what if
wondering
here
if
in
he
my
actually
mind.
had
If Trump
some
had come in
gains.
a week earlier with that endorsement before the early votes were cast, are there 1,500 votes there for Feenstra? There could have been.
What are some of the major trends that you have seen coming out of last night's primary as we look ahead to November? I mean, we've been compiling this thing. You and I have had these repeated conversations since the beginning of this primary season, talking about some of the trends. So as we look at what happened last night, especially with some of these critical House races that could switch, the power of the House one way or the other. What are you looking at? What did you see?
Look, we just saw the setup. I think in a way, the most competitive races for the general election that we were seeing primaries for last night, I think the party establishments kind of got the candidates they wanted. So, for instance, the night started in New Jersey, 7th congressional district. The Republican incumbent there is Tom Kean. This is a classic swing district, and the Democrats, it was a landslide for their candidate, Rebecca Bennett, in the primary. The party establishment had kind of, coalesced around her. On the Senate side, think about Democrats in Iowa. Democrats are saying they want to make Iowa, put it in play this November. That is a very steep hill to climb. Iowa's a state that Donald Trump carried by double digits, but there were two candidates in the Democratic primary for Senate in Iowa. Josh Turek, a state legislator from Western Iowa, calls himself a moderate. He represents in the state legislature a district that Trump carried. He was running against somebody from literally the most liberal state legislative district in the state. National Party wanted Turek in that race, and they got Turek in that race. Wow. He won that primary. There were other races last night that are not going to be competitive in the general election where you saw that sort of left-wing, that insurgency that we've been seeing in some other Democratic primaries, come through. There was a race in New Jersey where Adam Hamawi won. It's the 12th congressional district, overwhelmingly Democratic district. He was backed by this new pro-Palestine super PAC, and he won that primary. He won it, pretty handily. So that's another. We've seen this now twice in these Democratic primaries for House in New Jersey this year. These Democrats, really left-wing Democrats, twice now have won, and he's likely to be the next congressman there because it's such a Democratic district. So in the non-competitive places in the general election, you're seeing that energy there from the left in the Democratic Party. But in those two battlegrounds we talk about there, Iowa as a state, potentially a battleground, and the 7th district in New Jersey, the party establishment got its way.
Steve Kornacki, thank you.
You got it, yes.
So on Tuesday, we talked about Russia's new wave of deadly attacks on Ukraine. Well, early this morning, Ukraine struck back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote on X that his country sent drones more than 600 miles to strike an oil export terminal in St. Petersburg. Russian authorities said several people were injured in these strikes. So how did Russia not see this coming? Are these strikes an escalation of the war? And what do they mean for potential peace talks? For this, I want to bring in Keir Simmons. He is our NBC News chief international correspondent, and he's currently on the ground in St. Petersburg. Hi, Keir.
Hey there, how you doing?
So tell me what you're seeing there. How have residents in St. Petersburg been reacting to the strikes? And can you actually see what has taken place? How visible are these drone strikes?
Really visible. And that's something that's incredibly striking about it, that we woke up this morning to black smoke across this historic city skyline. And St. Petersburg, as you know, is a city with a storied history that goes back to the Second World War. That is, it's a European city close to the border with Eastern Europe. So it is a place that has an impact when something happens, and something sure happened. I mean, I've got to say, years of covering Russia, I've never been in a major city and seen a drone strike like this, with it being we stood in the center of the town, of the city, and could see the smoke. And now there is a video on social media, on the internet, from locals of drones hitting oil facilities. The Ukrainians themselves have released video. The Russian Ministry of Defense says that hundreds of Ukrainian drones were intercepted. But still, the Russians are beginning to get used to this, I would say. And it's, I think for many, it's really the defining experience of this war.
It's interesting, Keir, because on Tuesday, we actually spoke to a Ukrainian journalist on the ground there in Kyiv. And he told us that since the U.S. has become less and less of a reliable ally, Ukraine has focused more on domestic weapons production, which I feel as if we are seeing the fruits of that focus now with this latest strike in St. Petersburg. The Russians are saying they shot down more than 700 Ukrainian drones just in the last 24 hours. Do we know how Moscow is going to respond to this?
Well, we actually spoke to Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, just in the past few hours, and her response was scathing. What she says is that look, now you guys, you're here and you're seeing what Ukraine is doing. This is her vocalizing. You're seeing how they're targeting our infrastructure. And then she goes on to say, you've not been reporting, she says, on the way that civilians have been killed, she says. And there's a particular case that they keep going back to from the past few weeks of a strike inside Russian-occupied Ukraine, eastern Ukraine. So the Russian response is vitriolic, and they are vowing retaliation. There certainly will be a sense that this was an attempt to send a message to President Putin, because St. Petersburg is the place where he grew up. It's where he began his politics, and he's on his way here for this big summit here, this big forum, and he will give a major, speech on Friday.
Well, let's talk about that, because you are actually in St. Petersburg, not because of these drone strikes, but because of this economic forum that you talk about, hence the reason why the Russian president is actually headed there. A U.S. delegation is also attending this forum. I mean, we haven't heard a lot about progression of peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in quite some time. There have been dribbles, but not really anything significant. What is the U.S. presence there at this economic forum and Vladimir Putin's presence there at this economic forum days after these drone strikes tell us about the status of the future of these peace talks and where things are headed?
Well, that nothing much is happening is what it really tells us, because it's a very, very limited presence. And in fact, Maria Zakharova from the Foreign Ministry, the Russian Foreign Ministry, I actually asked her about the Iran war and what her thoughts were about the position the Trump administration is in with Iran. And she said, we want them to wrap that up and come back and focus here on negotiations here. Kind of saying, where are they?
If we talk about the war with Iran briefly, is that war benefiting Russia? Is it benefiting Russia on the battlefield because, the world's eye, the world's attention has been turned elsewhere now?
Well, I was just thinking when you were talking about Ukraine's innovations when it comes to drones, that there's another country that has been innovative when it comes to drones, and that country is Iran. And Russia and Iran have now a strategic partnership. They signed it last year, and Iran, of course, as you know, has been supplying Russia with drones to fire on Ukraine. There's definitely an innovation happening in multiple places, and crucially, not just America's allies, but also its adversaries. And I do think there's a real question now about that Iran-Russia relationship and where that goes. It certainly has been over a long time cautious. They haven't fully trusted each other, but it did change substantially after President Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, because the Russians needed those Iranian drones. And now, to what extent will Iran's use of drones, how will that experience be learnt by the Russians and by others even?
Keir Simmons, as always, thank you.
You bet. It's a pleasure.
We are going to leave you with our extra scoop, where we take you behind the scenes to give some of the flavor inside the stories that are driving the day. Tonight is a very big night. We're looking at game 1 of the NBA playoffs. You got the New York Knicks and San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, I will say, got to be forthcoming about this. As New Yorkers, we are firmly fans of the New York Knicks here. I'm sorry, Texas. So we're going to tap Jonathan Macri. He runs the Knicks Film School podcast network to tell us what we need to know as we are watching the game tonight. Hey, Jonathan.
How you doing?
People are calling this matchup the David versus Goliath. And the Knicks star player, Jalen Brunson, is just 6'2", while the Spurs, Wemby, right? We know how big he is. He's like, what, 7'4"? Who's got the edge here?
I think it really is pretty close to a toss-up series. Let me say this about Victor Wembanyama. I've been watching basketball for over 30 years, have spoken to people who have been covering the sport for far longer than that. I don't think there's ever been a player who can impact a game defensively like this guy does, because obviously he's very tall and he has a big reach, but he also is very smart and he's always locked in. That said, the thing that makes this offense for the Knicks very special, and why I think there's a lot of optimism around New York that they'll actually be able to pull this off, is they have kind of, they have a lot of very individually talented players, Jalen Brunson first among them. But this is a team that was put together, over the course of several years, specifically with the mindset of how can we get the most amount of basketball skill on the court at one time. And they really do, when they're playing right and they're hitting their mark, it is like a symphony on the basketball court. So
Wow.
For as much as Victor Wembanyama, super special player, and he impacts everything an offense does, I think the way the Knicks are operating, they'll be able to find holes and navigate the San Antonio defense.
So here's the other question, because you look at what the Spurs have just been through, right? They're coming off this brutal 7-game stretch versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Knicks have been chilling, right, for the last week or so. They took the Cavs in 4 games in the Eastern Conference. How does that contribute to what we may be looking at tonight?
Well, it's an interesting question, because this was the exact same scenario that faced the Knicks going into that Cavs series, because they had swept their previous opponent in 4 games and had more than a week off, and they came out against Cleveland and they found themselves down by 20 points in the fourth quarter. It took one of the all-time legendary NBA comebacks to win that game. What we heard from the Knicks players and coaches going into this finals is that they learned lessons from that prior experience and they changed their approach. I think they probably spent a little bit more time on the practice court going into this finals. So I have to think that's something that we'll see impact the series, especially game 1 tonight.
Is this going to be a different story than 1999? The Knicks did not fare well.
They did not fare well, and I could say that from firsthand experience. I was in the building as a 16-year-old when the Spurs raised their first trophy, first of 5, and it was, it was a very different situation, because I think that Knicks team was an 8th seed. They were never expected to get anywhere close to the finals. So when they made it through the Eastern Conference, I think in a way that was like their world championship. This team is different. This team was assembled with the intent on winning a title. I think they're going to be ready for this. I think it's going to be a different result.
The series is the best of 7. Fill in the blank for me. Knicks in...
I'm going Knicks in 6. For anybody who doesn't know the rules, that would mean that they would win at home in Madison Square Garden, which I don't know how the island of Manhattan is not going to sink into the ocean. It's going to be a scene. Look, this is going to be a good series. I do think it's going to be a close series. If it went 7 games, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I am leaning on the Knicks, the fact that they are a veteran group, the fact that the Spurs are a little younger. And I think this Knicks team is playing with a sense of purpose that they were very clearly not satisfied after they won the East. And I think you're going to see that starting tonight in game 1.
Jonathan Macri, let's go Knicks.
Let's go Knicks.
That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugan. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.